I appreciate you coming to celebrate this special anniversary with us. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Brittany Ledyard, and I grew up here at Bellevue First United Methodist Church with Abby and Bree and Brent. I had a wonderful childhood here that included Sunday school and youth groups and confirmation classes. I remember dressing the church up like Narnia for a celebration of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I remember playing sardines during youth group sleepovers, exploring every nook and cranny of the building in the search for the best hiding place. I remember learning about Noah's Ark and Jonah's whale. I remember sitting at Reverend Dave Braun's knee, clutching a nativity figurine to hear about baby Jesus in the manger. I remember mourning Todd Evans together, the year that he was killed. I watched you support my mother when her marriage fell apart, and I watched you celebrate with her when she found love again and married someone new. Even when my personal faith journey took me down other roads, I never left the church completely. I've celebrated Christmas Eve with this congregation for most of the years of my life. And I got to do all of these things in a community that loved me unconditionally. Because I'm also queer. I am bisexual, meaning that I am attracted both to people of my own gender and to people not of my gender. I knew that as early as the age of 4. It was never a thing I questioned or struggled with, it just was. Growing up here meant that I grew up with a whole village of peers and adults who fought for my equal rights, even when most of you probably never knew you were fighting for me. You never knew because I never told anyone. Not because I was afraid to, but because I never felt a need to. It never once occurred to me that you wouldn't love me regardless of my orientation. I was in college before my mother finally sat me down and said, "You know, it's okay if you're gay, right?" And I looked at her confused and I said, "You know, I am, right?" The first time I marched in the Seattle Pride Parade was with this church. Because I saw you do the work to build a reconciling congregation, I saw that my queerness was okay. You told me every Sunday that I was loved the way I was. I want to tell you a story about how that love saved my life. Some of you know, but most of you don't, that last year my life went to hell very literally. The police kicked in my front door with a search warrant, and I learned the hard way that my partner of 12 years had committed unspeakable crimes. The subsequent investigation cleared me of involvement, but the thing about an investigation is that it happens quietly while arrest records are public. This being the age of the internet, it didn't take long for my ex's charging documents to go viral on Facebook with the assertion that I was participating in his crimes. Overnight, I lost almost every relationship I'd ever had. I had to flee social media to escape harassment and threats of violence. Friends who'd known me for 15 years ghosted me without ever even asking me what happened because the contents of those documents are so ugly they shut down all rational thought. I do not blame any of those people for not wanting to make space for that ugly in their lives. I sure didn't want to make space for it. For a year, my world was so frightening and dangerous and uncertain that COVID-19 was background noise. I share this because while I don't know what it's like to be shamed for being queer, I do know what it's like to be shamed. I do know what it's like to feel buried under the stain of a stigma that can never, ever come off. I survived that trauma because I have resilience, and I have resilience in large part because of this church family. You gave me the gift of knowing that I had a right to expect love even when the world said otherwise. So when my life fell apart, I came here, hoping to find a place of forgiveness where I could start to heal from that tremendous wound. And you know what? I found that. I came back to church hoping for community in a time of loneliness, and to my surprise, I found Jesus Christ. Despite growing up in Sunday school and youth groups and confirmation classes, I have never called myself a Christian. My faith journey went elsewhere. The Bible never spoke to me the way it seemed to speak to people I loved. I respected it for its cultural value, but I never understood it. This year that changed. And when I started reading the Bible for myself, really reading it instead of just absorbing cultural messages about what it meant, I discovered a love bigger than anything I knew was possible. I discovered a love that is not an easy way out, a spiritual bypass to paper over the hardships of life, but rather a continuous challenge to soften past the armor each of us has built around our hearts. I discovered that there are no exceptions to God's love. None. Nobody is excluded. Not Paul of Tarsus, who persecuted Christians. Not Mary Magdalene and her 7 demons. Not the Samaritan adulteress at Jacob's well. Not me, who failed to recognize that her partner was dangerous and violent. And certainly not God's beautiful LGBTQ children, no matter what God's other children may think they know about it. The gospel of Jesus Christ is a gospel of empathy. They didn't have a word for that in the ancient world. We didn't have a word for it until 1909. But if there's anyone here today who's ever heard of Dr. Brené Brown, you know that science is increasingly proving that empathy is the antidote to shame. Empathy is the love that loves our neighbor as ourselves. Empathy is the love that spurs us to anger and action when we witness oppression. Empathy is the love that speaks hard truths and holds strong boundaries with infinite grace. Empathy is the love that makes it impossible to wage war, because any harm done to another is harm done to ourselves. And any harm done to ourselves is harm done to the people we love. Empathy is the love that restores our connection to God and heals us when everything feels like despair. The thing about empathy, though, is that we have to learn to recognize it by its presence in our relationships. Most of us can't just wake up one morning and decide to be empathetic. We struggle to behave with empathy if we've rarely experienced it from others. That is the gift Jesus gives us, not just with his death on the cross, but with his life and his teaching and his love. If we did not have empathy modeled for us in our lives, we can still experience it through Christ. What a gift. I know that not everyone who's with us today was a part of my story, but the fact that you are here today, the fact that you have chosen to make this congregation your church home, knowing we are a reconciling congregation, that makes you part of this story. You're part of our future. You're part of the world we're making together. God's been creating it for us this whole time, but we are the ones whose hands will have to build it. So I'd like to invite you to a small practice today. I invite you to sit down, maybe just for 15 or 20 minutes, and imagine what that future looks like to you. Write a journal entry or draw some stick figures, or find a scripture verse that captures the tomorrow you want to be part of. Find or make something concrete that reminds you what we're aiming for. We cannot build what we cannot imagine, so spend some time imagining. I know that that might be hard with all that's happening in the world right now. But I think we can all see that this is why the work of our imagining and building is so important. I've had an unfair advantage on that front because I know exactly what I want our future to look like. I want a future where every single child on this earth grows up knowing that they are as treasured and protected and as fiercely loved by their church community as I was. I want a church that proves God's promise in Hosea chapter 1, verse 10, a promise Paul reminds us of in Romans chapter 9, verse 26, and in the very place where it was said to them, "You are not my people," there they will be called children of the living God. That's the love that's going to save the world. And I know that we already have it because we have had it for 25 years. How are we going to share it next?